All right, everybody, we're back, and we're going to talk about installing the hoops into your hoop house. Number one, you got to get these things assembled. Julian, you have recently assembled a lot of hoops for our 30-foot house. How'd that go for you?
It's not difficult at all. So, the hoops come wrapped. So each hoop, depending on how many sections it is, it could be 3 to 4 sections. So the suede gen slides into the male slides into the female, creates your hoop. And then you use a couple of screws at each connection on the hoop. Now you want to make sure you put those screws in the side so that when you put the plastic over the top, you don't have a catch area, catch the plastic on. Once they're assembled, then you can raise the hoop itself and then insert it into your ground posts. One thing I recommend is assemble all your hoops first and then mark the ends. So if you mark the ends, the hoops are going to be the same. They're going to be the same length from one end to the other. If you mark the ends, if you mark 6 inches up, you can put a clamp on it, so a wood clamp, some type of metal clamp or something, so that when you slide it into the ground posts, they don't go down too far.
Now, that's assuming that you've got all your ground posts completely level.
Right, so you should have your ground posts level. And if they are, since the hoops are the same length and you made the same measurements, when you insert them to where the clamps stop at that line, then all your hoops are going to be the same height. It's going to be uniform throughout the structure across it. And then you can drill through your hoops, put your bolts in, and attach to your ground posts.
Now, one thing that I think you get a lot of phone calls in is a lot of folks will say, well, the hoops are wider. Like I ordered a 30-foot house. My ground posts are 30 foot on center, but this thing is 31 and a half foot long. That's very intentional because as two people pick up the hoop and they raise it up and they walk it to the ground post, one person's going to put theirs in first, and the other person is going to push in ever slightly and then set theirs down in there. And when it pushes, it raises the whole structure up a little bit and kind of gives a spring loading action. And part of that spring load action is what gives that hoop a lot of its strength. So it really tightens it up and firms it up, and just be prepared that it's probably going to be a little wider, and that's completely okay. Another thing that I didn't write down that we may want to cover is you'll see a lot of people put duct tape on the seams, or duct tape especially around where those screws are that you're putting on the side. That's completely fine. It kind of acts as a cushion. I know some folks, they'll put a felt strip on the top. Hey, whatever you want to do, it's your house. There's no right or wrong. I see people that just don't like the look of that. I'm very confident that this plastic is going to last whether you do that or not. Anything you can do to cushion it is probably a good idea, but it's really up to you. So Julian, you just talked about using the clamps to level out those hoops as you're putting in the clamps. That's one trick that you taught us on the last time we did one, and it was great. And it's at this point that you would drill through those ground posts like we talked about in a couple of previous episodes to run that bolt through there. So is there any tips you have about drilling that?
I would definitely use a center punch. Automatic center punch works better. It helps that drill bit start so that when you're trying to drill that hole, because you're drilling on a pipe, which is a round surface, it's not flat. It helps it bite in and not want to divert and walk around on you. Because when that bit's spinning, it wants to walk a little bit. Now, once you have the hoops in the ground post, they do flex a little bit. So if you're standing to the side and you look at them, they could be leaning one way or the other, but we're going to fix all that here in the next couple of steps.
Yeah, basically, we're just placing it in there. It's going to go left, it's going to go right, some's going to be a little taller, some's going to be a little lower. It's through the connection points with the ridge pole and the hip and baseboards that really straighten this thing out. So now that you've started putting the hoops in the ground post, we're going to have you obviously start on one end and go all the way and put all the hoops in. And like we just said, they're going to be left, right, tall, whatever. We're going to start fixing that by completely plumbing or keeping straight up and down the first hoop. So it's going to be 90 degrees from level. And there's a couple of things you can kind of do to ensure that that stays there. One thing that I've seen is you can take 2 stakes and run them out from the hoop and run them out from the hoop house. This is especially if you're working on your own or with a very small team. And you can take a strap and wrap it around. You're not tying it to the top, but you're just wrapping it around. So whenever you put that level on the hoop itself, you can move that strap left, you can move it right, and once it's level, then wrap it around those 2 corresponding stakes. So we'll put a graphic up on YouTube and you can kind of take a look at that. But once that's straight, that's then going to be the measure of our hoop house is 4 foot on center, and so 4 foot from that perfectly level end wall to the next hoop, you're going to be 4 foot on center. And as you put your cross connectors over the top of the hoop, and there's a little saddle that then the ridge pole slides into, I kind of like keeping it straight as I go. That way I don't have to climb up the ladder twice. So if you start with that perfectly plumb end wall and you go to the next one and you put it 4 foot on center and tighten it up, you're also going to have somebody on the ground just kind of ensuring that you're straight up and down. And once that's done, you're going to have the first hoop, then the second hoop, and then every corresponding hoop like that begin to straighten itself out. Now, you'll see that it really starts to become level up at the top, and then it's going to be straight up and down as the ribs should be. You still may notice that they're going to lean left and right. That's completely okay, because the next thing that will happen will be the baseboards and the hip boards to kind of finish tightening all that up.
Once you get the ridge pole all the way across all your hoops, whether that's a 20-foot hoop house or a 150-foot long hoop house, if you stand out to the side, you look at all the hoops and how they're stacked, 1 or 2 hoops may be off a little bit. They may not be exactly 4 foot apart. So understand that this is not a lathe or a mill or a precision machine. This is a hoop house made with tubing. It can be off a little bit, and your structure is going to be just fine. It's still going to work exactly how it was intended to work. So if for some reason it's 100 feet at the bottom, and if you measured across all the tubes all the hoops at the top, and it's 100 foot 2 inches, it's going to be just fine. Your plastic's still going to fit on it. You're still going to be able to have a perfectly great hoop house.
So up next, now that we have all these poles up, we started hitting on the ridge pole, so we're going to talk about that in the next segment. See you then.